So we're at the end of another season in Buffalo, and Buffalo's clinched. You can clinch it, 31st overall. There's some uncomfortable conversations coming out though right now. The uncomfortable conversation in Buffalo is one that I've seen a couple places. The culture of losing. It's a thing. Remember the Quebec Nordiques in the early 90s? This was a team with the young Joe Sakic. This was the team that drafted Lindros and then traded his rights to pick up Forsberg. But before the Lindros trade, that was a statement about the Quebec Nordiques a lot. And I see some parallels between this team and the Nordiques. Now, the good news for Buffalo is that team won a cup. The bad news is they had to move to Denver to do it. So, and they got Patrick Roy to do it. There's definitely something to be said for the fact that Buffalo's young. And the concern being, these young players, all they're knowing is losing. The biggest example being Ristolainen. Ristolainen, not anywhere close to a playoff series ever in his career so far. And at some point, while it's the organization and it's the team, the players start to absorb some of that reputation themselves. There was a comment, an article I read that Eichel has been disrespected by players on the ice and just in general, and that his injury this year came at the absolute worst time. Jason Botterill said it was at the worst time. He was getting it together. They just had that successful road trip through Western Canada, and then he's injured. Now, the blue dots are for the ones that I think project as next year's top six. So O'Reilly, Okposo, Eichel, Mittelstadt, Reinhart, and I think Alex Nylander is going to be given a shot at being on in their top six on this team. Nylander hasn't had a great season in the American League, but they do view Nylander as a guy that they want to see play with Casey Mittelstadt. So the biggest problem I have with this lineup is this. Okposo's had an up and down year. He's been an okay free agent signing, not fantastic. O'Reilly is a very solid, undervalued forward. He really is. But him and Okposo are the only veterans in here in this top six. Eichel has been injured a number of times in his first 3 years in the NHL. Mittelstadt, rookie. Reinhart, up and down. He's been good for the second half of this season. How does it translate next year? And Nylander, who, again, as I said, has been inconsistent at the American League level, and they're going to give him a shot at the NHL level. The rest of their forwards, Pominville is a veteran. I don't know that he's going to stay next year. That $5.6 million, it's a lot of money. So I don't think they can trade him either. So he probably starts the season in Buffalo. Girgensons has one more year at $1.6 million. All offense has left his game. Larson at $1.475 million isn't going anywhere, but he's not a top six forward either. Baptiste, Kevin Porter, Rodriguez. Rodriguez may get a shot at a top six spot if Nylander drops out. But is Rodriguez a guy that you look at offensively and say, yeah, he's a top six forward in the NHL? I don't know. Rodriguez in Buffalo to me is kind of like a Connor Sherry in Pittsburgh. Sherry was able to score goals with Crosby, and he's done the most with the opportunities he's had. But do you look at Connor Sherry and say, okay, if he was on an offensively challenged team, he could really turn their attack around? No. And I get that same feeling with Rodriguez. Scott Wilson's coming back as well, $625K. The only RFAs they have to worry about are Baptiste and Reinhart. Unrestricteds are these guys over here. Pouliot, Nolan, and Josephson up front are their free agents they're going to lose. I can't see them bringing any of them back. Josh Georges leaves the blue line. Casey Nelson, Justin Falk, and in net Chad Johnson. And again, I don't see them necessarily bringing any of them back. I guess Falk could come back on a value contract, but that doesn't help their top four. Ristolainen, Bogosian, Scandella, Beaulieu, McCabe, Antipin, and Tennyson. Those are the defensemen according to Cap Friendly, and by Cap. You'll notice this by Cap hit. Buffalo has some issues. Buffalo has some very serious issues. And when you look at their depth on the blue line, Will Borgen could definitely come in next year and get himself a spot on this lineup, but this is a team that desperately needs to win the lottery. If they win the lottery, if they get Rasmus Dahlin, how much does that help? Well, it gives them 2 top 4 defensemen. Scandella's a top 4. I think, I don't know. I'm on the fence with Scandella. I don't know if I'd rather see him as a 3-4 or as a 5-6 on a really good team. And in net, Leonard, of course, is an RFA. He's been a dead man walking in Buffalo for a while. They're going with Ullmark. All hail Ullmark. The problem being, we don't know what Linus Ullmark is at the NHL level yet. He hasn't played enough games. So for Buffalo to say, all right, next year we're going with Ullmark would be kind of like if Vancouver said, all right, next year we're going with Demko. I would be very skeptical. And I like Demko and I like Ullmark, but I'm very skeptical when a team says, all right, this is going to be our starter next year. Johnson moves out and Leonard probably gets traded as an RFA. But again, if you're going to talk about a culture of losing, and it's not fair to pin that on the players because it's management that's put them in this position, but it gets tagged on the team. Buffalo has to come out of this. There's an article I was reading from one of my old hockey magazines about the Buffalo Sabres drafting Jack Eichel. And GM at the time, Tim Murray, saying, I don't want to be in the lottery anymore starting next year. We want to start building up. We have to start building up. Murray's out of a job, and Buffalo's back to 31st overall. And, this has been going on for years. And you look at teams like Carolina and Florida as examples just off the top of my head, or even Edmonton before last year, and it can be really hard to dig your way out. This is why, as a Canuck fan, I'm mildly optimistic it's going to get better, but I'm aware it can get worse before it gets better. Buffalo got their franchise player 3 years ago, and they're still waiting on him achieving his full potential. Like, he's hit 60 points, but he hasn't played that many games this year. And they haven't really surrounded him with a really good team. This team isn't bad. It's not great. When you look at next year's cap space, they currently have, under a $75 million cap, they have $15 million in cap space. So that cap will probably go to $80 million, so that's $20 million in cap space. But then the problem you have with Buffalo is this. Let's say Green's your best unrestricted free agent defenseman. Just throwing Green out there as an option. He doesn't help Buffalo. He doesn't go to Buffalo. And he's going to command a pretty penny because there aren't a lot of UFA defensemen. So unrestricted free agency doesn't necessarily help Buffalo. So you add Dahlin to this blue line. Are they then a playoff team? No. How far away from the playoffs are Buffalo? Does anybody know? This is where it gets kind of dark, to be honest. And I don't say this because I'm saying that these guys are crap or this team is crap. I say it because there are some good pieces here, but they need that veteran leadership to bring it together. They traded out Kane. They got back prospect, draft pick, all this stuff, which is great. And I don't think keeping Kane would have been the answer for this team either. Now, in the offseason, if they brought Kane back as a UFA and they had all those assets as well, maybe they start getting better next year. But is Kane the guy you bring in because you want to win games? That's my issue with Evander Kane. You look at the teams he's been with and how many of them have reached the playoffs. How many playoff games has he ever played? He has a chance with San Jose this year to kind of shed some of that reputation. But how many of these guys are getting that reputation, and how many of these guys that have got on the board are not necessarily ready? And what if Middlestad isn't quite the answer yet? The big question that I have for you guys, and especially for Sabres fans, is how long do you expect it to be until this team is legit in the playoffs? I can't see it next year. 2 years with the right moves, maybe. But if that losing mentality kicks in again next year, if this team is right back in 31st next year, do you look at trading out some of the core guys who may look like they're okay with losing? And that's where the losing culture comes in, is when you have a team that when they lose a game, they don't really care. The most famous example I can use is the movie Moneyball, right? The A's are losing, they're in the tank, and they're partying after a loss in the locker room. And, GM Brad Pitt comes in and destroys the boombox and goes, that's how losing sounds. And there's some truth to that, that there are teams that just, yeah, they're losing, whatever. That was the comments about the Edmonton Oilers before the Taylor Hall trade, that there was a culture in an Oilers locker room that, yeah, we lose, whatever, it doesn't matter, let's go out and have some drinks and party. And it's dangerous because it means that you're looking at players that are okay with losing. It's fine, it's not a big deal. That's the danger with Buffalo. But let me know your thoughts. Is a losing culture an issue in Buffalo, or is it just a media type thing to sort of bring fan interest into something that otherwise isn't really all that newsworthy? And how much would getting Rasmus Dahlin on the blue line help this team? How much would getting a potential franchise defenseman, does that get them into contention next year? And look over the UFA list and tell me who you'd like to see Buffalo sign. So this is not a doom and gloom Buffalo video. This is more of a, I know not many people are talking about Buffalo right now, and they should be, because there's a lot of pieces here to like, but the depth I'm not a big fan of, and I'm not a fan of that blue line. I'm not. Even if Bogosian's healthy right now, if McCabe's healthy right now, I'm not a fan of that blue line. But let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.